Chapter 1: The Beacon Beckons. Evie Whitman stood at the edge of the rocky shore, the wind whipping her auburn hair around her face as she gazed at the silhouette of Whitman Lighthouse. It stood tall against the gray skies of coastal Maine, a sentinel perched on a craggy promontory. The once white tower was now faded and peeling, with its windows grimy and its door splintered by decades of salt and wind. Evie took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of saltwater and pine. Despite the lighthouse's dilapidated state, she felt an undeniable pull, a connection to the legacy her ancestors had left behind. Her great-grandfather, Samuel Whitman, had built the lighthouse nearly a century ago. It had guided countless ships safely through the fog and churning waves, before its light was extinguished, abandoned after her grandmother passed away a decade ago. She looked down at the old, yellowed blueprint rolled under her arm, a relic she'd found buried in her grandmother's attic. She'd spent months poring over its intricate designs, studying each line and curve like a roadmap to a forgotten past. This blueprint was the key to her family legacy, a plan to rebuild and relight Whitman Lighthouse. She was determined to honor her grandmother's wish of seeing the beacon shine once again. The sound of crunching gravel made her turn. A silver pickup truck pulled up beside her, and a man stepped out. He was rugged, with a tousled head of dark hair and the kind of tan that spoke of years spent outdoors. He gave her a nod and leaned against the truck's hood, eyeing her with curiosity. "You must be the Whitman girl," he said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. "Evie Whitman," she corrected, offering a tentative smile. "And you are?" "Sam," he replied simply. "Sam Dawson. Folks around here said you'd be coming." Evie studied him, wondering how much the locals knew about her arrival and her plans for the lighthouse. "And what did they tell you?" "That you'd be trying to fix up that old lighthouse." He gestured toward the crumbling tower. "Big job. You'll need help." She looked back at Whitman Lighthouse, a lighthouse with so many memories of summers spent with her grandmother, collecting shells and watching the ships pass by. Sam pushed off the truck and approached her, his eyes softening. "It's a noble thing you're doing, Miss Whitman. Your family has deep roots here. I'll help you with the restoration if you'll have me." A mixture of relief and gratitude washed over her. She'd been wondering how she'd find the right people to assist her with such a massive project. "I'd appreciate that, Mr. Dawson." "Sam," he corrected gently. "Let's get to work, then." Together, they crossed the rocky shore toward the lighthouse. Evie couldn't help but glance at Sam occasionally, curious about the stranger who was so willing to help a project of this scale. The lighthouse, with its weather-beaten facade and broken windows, loomed ahead like a weary sentinel. The task would be immense, but Evie felt an unshakable determination to see it through. As they reached the base of the lighthouse, she placed her hand on the door, feeling the coarse texture of the wood under her palm. The faded words "Whitman Lighthouse" were barely visible on a rusted plaque. "This is just the beginning," she murmured. Sam stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the tower's peak. "Yeah. Let's make that beacon shine again." And so, with a firm grip and a resolute push, Evie opened the creaky door to Whitman Lighthouse, stepping into the dusty darkness of a place where memories lingered and a new story was about to unfold. Chapter 2: A Mysterious Local. Evie had always been the kind of person who preferred a plan, a carefully laid blueprint for every step she took. But the lighthouse seemed to have its own idea of timing. The interior was a labyrinth of dust and disrepair, with broken banisters, moldy walls, and heaps of old nautical equipment cluttering the rooms. The scent of damp wood hung thick in the air as she explored each level of the spiraling staircase, taking careful notes in her journal. By the time she returned to the ground floor, Sam had already cleared a path through the debris, stacking old crates and broken planks neatly to one side. His sleeves were rolled up to reveal muscled forearms, and sweat glistened on his brow. "How bad is it?" he asked, without looking up, prying nails out of a splintered beam. Bad, but not hopeless, Evie replied, brushing dust off her jeans. It's a challenge, but we can make it work. He gave a nod of approval. That's the spirit. Over the next few days, Evie learned that Sam was as steady as the tides. He arrived early each morning with a thermos of coffee, and they would work side by side to clear the wreckage, assessing what could be salvaged. Though he was quiet and reserved, she could tell his knowledge of carpentry ran deep, and his meticulous handiwork made up for what she lacked in experience. But Sam remained a mystery. He rarely spoke about himself, keeping their conversations focused on the project or the latest local news. Whenever she asked him a personal question, he would deflect with a shrug or a change of topic. It was as if he had wrapped himself in an impenetrable shell, one that she wasn't sure she could crack. One afternoon, while taking a break on the porch, Evie ventured into new territory. "You know so much about this place, Sam. Have you always lived around here?" He glanced at her, then down at his coffee mug. "Most of my life." "What did you do before this?" she pressed gently. He took a slow sip, as if considering his answer. "I worked for my family's construction company. We used to build houses all over the county." "And now?" He turned to look at the lighthouse, where the sunlight glinted off the fading paint. "Now, I help out where I'm needed." Evie nodded, sensing she wouldn't get much more out of him on the subject. But later that evening, when she visited the local hardware store for supplies, she couldn't help but ask the cashier about Sam. "Oh, Sam Dawson?" The elderly woman behind the counter gave a knowing smile. "He's a good man, but he keeps to himself. Ever since his brother died, he hasn't been the same." "What happened to his brother?" Evie asked. "A fishing accident out at sea. Sam blames himself. He gave up the family business afterward and hasn't built a house since. But he's always around, helping out where he can." Evie thanked the cashier and left, her thoughts swirling around Sam's hidden grief. She understood now why he avoided talking about his past, and why he seemed so reluctant to forge new connections. The next morning, she met Sam on the porch, with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a warm smile. She didn't bring up what she'd learned, but offered him kindness instead, and she noticed how he slowly started to open up to her. As the weeks went by and the lighthouse took shape, Sam shared stories of growing up in the village, of fishing trips and summer bonfires on the beach. Evie, in turn, spoke of her grandmother's love for the lighthouse, and her dream of seeing its beacon relit. One evening, as they stood by the shore watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sam broke the silence. "You know, I wasn't sure if I could ever step into a building project again after my brother passed." Evie turned to him, seeing the raw emotion in his eyes. "But you did." He met her gaze and nodded. "Yeah. Maybe it's time to build something again." A comfortable silence settled between them as the tide lapped at the shore. The lighthouse stood tall behind them, a silent witness to the beginnings of something that felt both hopeful and fragile. Sam was no longer the mysterious local to Evie, he had become a partner and a friend. And though the journey was far from over, the beacon was beginning to beckon them both forward. Chapter 3: Uncovering Secrets. The morning fog hung thick over the rocky coast as Evie climbed the spiraling staircase to the lantern room. The scent of freshly cut wood mingled with the salty air, and the gentle rhythm of the waves against the rocks provided a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. Sam was already upstairs, carefully installing new window panes into the rusted frames. The morning sun glimmered through the glass, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the beams of light. Evie approached him quietly, watching as he worked with methodical precision, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Morning," she greeted him. He glanced up, giving her a brief but warm smile. "Morning. Almost done with these windows." She nodded appreciatively, then looked around the lantern room, taking in the view from their elevated perch. The coastline stretched out below them, a rugged expanse of cliffs and evergreens reaching toward the endless ocean. "I was thinking we should start clearing out the storage rooms today," she said. "Sounds like a plan," Sam replied, securing the final pane. Together, they descended to the base of the lighthouse, where several storage rooms had remained untouched for years. Evie had always been curious about what lay behind their locked doors, but the extensive exterior repairs had taken priority. Sam set to work prying open the first door, which groaned in protest before giving way with a cloud of dust. The room was filled with an assortment of old maritime equipment, fishing nets, and wooden crates stacked high against the walls. Evie stepped inside, scanning the room for anything salvageable. She found a worn leather journal on one of the shelves, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping through it, she realized it was a logbook detailing daily observations of the lighthouse's operations, meticulously recorded by her great-grandfather. The pages were filled with entries about the weather, ship sightings, and routine maintenance. Sam moved on to the next room while Evie stayed behind, engrossed in her great-grandfather's notes. As she read through his words, she noticed an unusual entry dated July 14, 1933, discovered a peculiar draft near the west wall of the storeroom. Must investigate further. Intrigued, Evie examined the wall in question. The paint was chipped and cracked, revealing the rough stone underneath. She ran her fingers along the uneven surface, searching for any indication of an opening. Then, just as her great-grandfather had described, she felt a faint breeze seeping through a hairline crack. "Sam," she called, her voice echoing off the walls. He appeared at the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's up?" "Help me move this crate," she said, pointing to a large wooden box that was propped against the wall. With a grunt, Sam lifted one end of the crate while Evie shoved it aside. Behind it, they found an old wooden panel, covering a narrow opening. Sam carefully pried the panel loose, revealing a hidden alcove beyond. Inside, there were stacks of letters bound with fraying ribbons, an antique sextant, and a rusted metal box. Evie picked up the box and tried to open it, but it was sealed shut with a padlock. "Think we can break this?" she asked Sam. He nodded and left the room, returning moments later with a pair of bolt cutters. With a quick snip, the padlock snapped open, and the lid creaked as Evie lifted it. Inside were several gold coins, a silver locket, and a folded piece of parchment. Evie carefully unfolded the parchment to reveal a hand-drawn map of the local coastline, marked with strange symbols and notes in her great-grandfather's handwriting. "This must be why he sealed it up," she whispered, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "He found something out there, but he didn't want anyone to know." Sam leaned closer, studying the map with her. "Looks like there's a spot circled near the old Whitman fishing grounds. Maybe it's worth checking out." Excitement coursed through Evie as she imagined uncovering more about her family's legacy. "I think you're right. We should follow this map and see where it leads." Sam nodded in agreement. "Let's finish up here and head out after lunch." As they carefully repacked the letters and stowed the gold coins for safekeeping, Evie couldn't help but feel a sense of adventure growing within her. The lighthouse had guarded its secrets for decades, but with Sam by her side, she was determined to uncover the truth and piece together the mystery of her great-grandfather's hidden treasure. Chapter 4: Storms and Shadows. The ocean breeze had grown colder as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Dark clouds rolled in from the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky shore where Evie and Sam stood studying the old map. The circled area lay near a set of jagged cliffs at the northern tip of the Whitman fishing grounds, known for its treacherous waters and unpredictable currents. "We should head out soon if we want to make it back before the storm hits," Sam suggested, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Evie nodded in agreement. They gathered their supplies, securing a flashlight and a sturdy coil of rope in their backpacks, before setting out across the rocky landscape. The wind whipped at their jackets as they climbed over uneven terrain, moving closer to the cliffs marked on the map. "This must be the spot," Evie said, pointing to the steep rock face rising before them. Sam inspected the map once more, squinting at the faded ink. "Yeah, but it looks like whatever he found is hidden somewhere along the cliff's edge." With careful steps, they picked their way down a narrow ledge toward a small cove. Sam tied the rope securely around a sturdy pine tree, lowering the other end over the edge. "I'll go first and make sure it's stable." He descended slowly, testing the rocky outcroppings as he went. Once he reached the cove, he called up to Evie. "It's safe. Come on down." Evie gripped the rope tightly and made her way down to where Sam stood waiting. The cove was sheltered from the wind, and the high cliffs surrounding them created an eerie silence. They scanned the rocky walls for any sign of an opening, but it wasn't until Evie stumbled upon a pile of loose stones that she realized what they were searching for. "Over here," she called, clearing away the rocks to reveal a narrow crevice. Sam joined her and shone his flashlight into the opening. The light illuminated a small cave, its floor covered in sand and bits of driftwood. They crawled inside, where Sam discovered a small wooden chest half buried in the sand. He brushed off the sand and pried open the lid. Inside were more gold coins, a faded photograph of Evie's great-grandfather, and a thick leather-bound journal. Evie opened the journal carefully, flipping through pages filled with notes about her great-grandfather's discoveries, observations of the coastline, and a final entry detailing the decision to hide the treasure and protect the family's legacy. As she read, Sam stood guard at the cave's entrance. "The storm's coming in fast. We should head back before the tide traps us here." Evie quickly stowed the journal in her backpack, and they climbed out of the cave just as raindrops began to fall. The cliffs were slick with water, and the wind howled around them as they ascended the rope. Sam went first, urging Evie to follow closely behind. They reached the top just as a lightning bolt cracked across the sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs and the swirling ocean below. Sam wrapped the rope around the tree trunk, securing it to prevent anyone else from venturing down to the cove. Then he grabbed Evie's hand and pulled her back toward the lighthouse. They stumbled through the rain, the wind nearly knocking them off their feet. By the time they reached the lighthouse porch, they were both soaked to the bone. Sam pushed open the door, and they collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" he asked, brushing the wet hair from her face. "I'm fine," Evie replied between gasps of air. "Just a little soaked." Sam went to light a fire while Evie peeled off her wet jacket and retrieved the journal from her bag. They settled by the fire, and Sam handed her a warm blanket. "Tell me what you found," he said, nodding toward the journal. Evie opened it to the final entry, reading aloud her great-grandfather's words about the lighthouse, the treasure, and the promise he made to protect the family legacy. He didn't want the treasure to fall into the wrong hands, so he hid it in that cave. "And he kept his promise," Sam said, his gaze steady and reassuring. Evie closed the journal and looked at Sam, feeling a warmth in her chest despite the cold storm outside. "Thank you for being there with me, for helping me uncover this." He gave her a soft smile and shifted closer. "We're in this together." The storm raged outside, but in the lantern room, the fire burned brightly as Sam and Evie shared a quiet moment of trust and companionship. Even with shadows lurking around them, they felt the steady light of the lighthouse beckoning them forward. Chapter 5: Promises and Truths. The morning after the storm, the air was crisp, and the sea reflected a calm azure. Sunlight glimmered off the ocean, as if the night's tempest had never happened. Inside the lighthouse, Evie and Sam were busy cataloging their finds from the cave, surrounded by scattered maps, notebooks, and old coins. Sam leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. "So, what now? Do we take this to a museum?" Evie set down the leather journal, her fingers tracing the faded initials on its cover. "I think we should share the history, but this is part of my family's legacy." I want to create a small exhibition right here in the lighthouse. He nodded thoughtfully. It would be a great tribute to your great-grandfather. They worked all day to prepare a space in the lighthouse for the new exhibit. Sam carefully restored an old display case, while Evie framed the photograph they found, placing it alongside the maps and the coins. They stood back to admire their work, the display shining in the soft lantern light. "It's beautiful," Evie said, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you, Sam." He met her gaze, his eyes warm. "You're welcome. I'm just glad to be a part of this." As they worked side by side, Sam's resolve began to crack. He could no longer ignore the emotions he had tried so hard to bury. The loss of his brother had left a void he thought could never be filled, but Evie's presence and her unwavering belief in rebuilding the lighthouse gave him hope again. That evening, after they finished their work, Sam lingered on the porch. Evie joined him, wrapped in a cozy sweater. The waves lapped at the shore, and a full moon bathed the coastline in silver light. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you," Sam began, his voice steady but hesitant. Evie turned to him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've been holding back because I was afraid to move on after my brother died. But being here with you, working on this lighthouse and uncovering these secrets together, has made me realize that I don't want to be stuck in the past anymore." He looked directly into her eyes, sincerity shining through. "I promise to be honest with you, to support you, and to help you make this lighthouse something truly special. If you'll have me." A soft breeze fluttered through Evie's hair as she absorbed Sam's words. She felt a deep, unbreakable connection with him. He had been her steady companion through the storm and the shadows, and now he was laying bare the truth she had sensed but not fully understood. "I want that too," she replied softly, reaching for his hand. "I'm here with you, Sam." He smiled and drew her closer, wrapping his arms around her as she leaned into his warmth. They stayed like that for a long moment, feeling the weight of their promises settle comfortably around them. When they finally parted, Sam gave her a reassuring nod. "Let's finish what we started. The beacon is almost ready to shine again." Together, they climbed the spiraling staircase to the lantern room, where the freshly installed glass windows revealed the moonlit sea. Sam began assembling the new lighting mechanism, while Evie checked the wiring and adjusted the reflectors. After several hours of meticulous work, the mechanism was ready. Evie took a deep breath and flipped the switch. The light flickered for a moment before shining brightly, casting a sweeping beam across the waves. They stood side by side, watching the beam slice through the darkness, guiding the way for any vessels navigating the fog. The light of the Whitman lighthouse was shining once more, a promise fulfilled and a truth illuminated. Evie and Sam shared a smile, knowing that together, they had restored not just a beacon, but a legacy, and perhaps something even deeper. Chapter 6: A Light That Shines. The restored Whitman Lighthouse cast its brilliant light across the rugged coastline, illuminating the rocky promontory and the waters beyond. The steady sweep of the beacon served as a silent but powerful testament to a dream fulfilled. It had taken months of hard work, but the structure now stood proud and renewed, a shining guardian over the ocean below. The village buzzed with excitement as Evie prepared for the grand reopening. Families and friends gathered on the shore, eager to witness the historic lighthouse relighting. Sam had arranged for a local folk band to play while a food truck served seafood chowder, providing warmth against the evening chill. Evie stood on the newly repaired porch, welcoming guests with a radiant smile. Sam appeared at her side, his smile matching hers. "Looks like a good turnout." "Better than I expected," Evie replied. "I'm so glad you're here with me." He reached for her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The evening unfolded in a festive swirl of laughter, music, and shared memories. People spoke warmly of the Whitman family, recounting stories of when the lighthouse guided their fathers and grandfathers' fishing boats safely through the fog. Evie listened intently, treasuring each tale and making a mental note to include them in the lighthouse exhibit. As twilight settled in and the band played its final notes, Evie stood at the microphone to address the crowd. Her eyes glistened with emotion as she spoke. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice echoing over the waves. "Restoring the Whitman Lighthouse has been a journey that I couldn't have completed without the help and support of this incredible community. My family built this beacon almost a century ago, and I hope it will continue to shine for generations to come." She paused and glanced at Sam, who stood by her side, his eyes filled with encouragement. "I'd also like to thank someone who has been with me through every step of this journey, who believed in the power of this lighthouse even when I doubted myself. Sam Dawson, thank you." The crowd applauded warmly as Sam joined her at the microphone. He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek before whispering, "You did it." "We did it," Evie corrected, beaming. As the applause settled, she and Sam turned toward the beacon and flipped the switch together. The lantern room lit up instantly, and the beam swung out across the dark ocean, illuminating the waves and reaching toward the stars. A collective gasp of awe rose from the crowd as they witnessed the first sweep of the newly restored light. It was a sight that had been absent for over a decade, and it filled the coastal community with a renewed sense of hope and belonging. Evie took a deep breath and let the weight of the moment settle within her. She looked up at the light, feeling the warmth of Sam's hand in hers, and knew that she had found her true north. After the ceremony, the guests slowly departed, and the shoreline fell quiet once more. Evie and Sam lingered in the lantern room, watching the ocean waves shimmer under the beacon's glow. "Do you think it'll stay this way?" Evie asked softly, leaning against the polished railing. "The light?" Sam asked, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "No," Evie replied with a smile, "this feeling." He took a moment to consider the question, then turned to her with unwavering certainty. "Yes. As long as we keep it shining." They stood together in the gentle glow of the lighthouse, the beams sweeping far and wide, a light that guided ships through the darkness and brought Evie and Sam to each other. The Whitman Lighthouse shone brightly that night, a beacon of promises kept, truths revealed, and love that would guide them both for years to come.